December 1944. Snow blanketed the Ardennes forest. Out of that silence came fire. Hitler launched one final, desperate strike. The goal: split the Allied lines, seize Antwerp, crush Allied morale once and for all. 200,000 German troops, 950 tanks, all hidden in the woods. The Allies never saw it coming, and when the attack began, the entire Western Front shook in disbelief. But could Germany's last gamble really change the war? The panzers thundered forward, tracks crushed the frozen earth. German armor pierced deep into the Ardennes. But behind the steel and fire, there was a weakness. Not in the men, not in the machines, in the fuel. Every mile advanced drained precious gasoline. Every burning tank meant reserves lost forever. The Wehrmacht had gambled everything on speed, but their lifeline was slipping away. German supply convoys struggled to keep up. Drums of fuel were emptying faster than they could be replaced. The spearheads pressed on, but the heart of the army was already starving. So desperate were the Germans that American fuel dumps became targets as vital as any bridge. Captured barrels were celebrated like treasure. One veteran would later recall, a single can of U.S. gasoline was worth more than gold. The Ardennes offensive rolled forward with fire and fury, but every burning gallon whispered the same truth. This was not just a battle of bullets, it was a race against the clock and against the fuel. Gauge, December 16, 1944. Snow covers the Ardennes. The forest is quiet. American soldiers expect boredom, not battle. Then, the sky erupts. Artillery rains down. German tanks roll out of the mist. The surprise is total. Chaos spreads through the U.S. lines. Units are cut off. Radios fall silent. Men retreat blindly through the snow. General Omar Bradley hears the first reports. At first, he refuses to believe them. A major German offensive. Impossible, he thinks, but reality is crashing down on his army. Still, the Americans do not collapse. Scattered units dig in. At lonely crossroads and villages, they fight. A handful of men delay entire battalions. Improvisation becomes survival. Engineers blow bridges to slow the tanks. Stragglers form new platoons on the spot. Commanders act without orders, holding wherever they can. The Germans expect panic. Instead, they meet resistance. Each are bought in blood slows the advance. The Ardennes becomes a battlefield of delay. Morale hardens. Soldiers know there is no retreat. Behind them lies Belgium and the Allied lifeline. If they break, the war could be lost. Out of shock comes resolve. Out of chaos, order is rebuilt. Within a week, the U.S. line begins to stabilize. The German gamble is already faltering. The Americans will not break, not here, not in the Ardennes. December 17, 1944. A day after the German attack begins, near the Belgian town of Malmedy, American troops surrender. They expect captivity. They expect food, maybe a cold barn, but they expect to live. Instead, they are herded into a snowy field, more than 100 men, shivering, hands raised. The guards are Waffen-SS, led by Joachim Peiper, a ruthless commander, feared on every front. Without warning, the machine guns open fire. Bullets tear through the prisoners. Men fall in heaps. Some are shot where they stand, others collapse and play dead in the snow. It is not a battle, it is execution. When it ends, more than 80 Americans lie still. A few survivors crawl away under cover of blood and bodies. Word spreads fast. By nightfall, U.S. soldiers across the Ardennes know the SS will show no mercy. Surrender is no longer an option. The massacre hardens resolve. American troops whisper, "Remember Malmedy." It becomes a rallying cry, a vow of vengeance. For many, it means one thing: fight to the last, no giving up, no hands raised. The snow is now stained with blood. The war has turned colder, darker, and the Ardennes is no longer just a battle field. It has become a place of reckoning. December 1944. The Ardennes is frozen solid. Snow drifts bury tanks. Breath hangs in the air like smoke. At the heart of it all lies Bastogne, a small Belgian town. 7 roads cross here. Whoever controls Bastogne controls the battlefield. The Germans know this, so do the Americans. And so begins one of the most desperate sieges of the war. The U.S. 101st Airborne Division, the Screaming Eagles, fresh from Holland, exhausted, under-equipped, but unbroken. They march into Bastogne just as the trap begins to close. Within days, the town is surrounded. German tanks on every road, artillery raining down from the hills, snow falling endlessly. The paratroopers have little food. Ammunition is scarce. Medical supplies are gone. Many fight without proper winter clothes. Toes blacken with frostbite. Wounded men lie in cellars, wrapped in rags. The Germans demand surrender. They send an envoy under a white flag. The message is simple: lay down your arms. Inside Bastogne, General Anthony McAuliffe reads it. His reply is one word: nuts. The Germans don't understand. The Americans explain. It means, go to hell. The fight goes on. Shells hammer the town. Day and night, houses collapse, fires rage. Still, the 101st holds the line. From foxholes in the snow, paratroopers fire at advancing tanks. Bazookas against armor, rifles against machine guns, every attack repelled. The skies remain gray. Resupply planes can't get through. But when the weather finally clears, parachutes blossom overhead. Ammo, food, medical kits, falling like salvation. By Christmas, the men are still surrounded, but they are still standing, frozen, hungry, but unbroken. Then, on December 26th, the rumble of engines. Patton's Third Army breaks through. Relief columns enter Bastogne. The siege is lifted. The crossroads never fell. The 101st Airborne never surrendered, and nuts became legend. Bastogne was more than a town. It was defiance. It was proof that even in the darkest winter, American resolve would not break. In the frozen chaos of the Ardennes, not every American was what he seemed. German intelligence had prepared a secret weapon, not a tank, not a rocket, but men, commandos, handpicked by Otto Skorzeny, the same daring officer who once rescued Mussolini from a mountaintop. This time, his mission was different: to slip behind American lines, to turn confusion into panic. His men spoke English, some better than others. They wore captured U.S. uniforms. They carried American weapons. They even drove American jeeps. Their orders were simple: sabotage bridges, cut phone wires, send convoys down the wrong road, spread rumors of attacks that never existed. It worked. Traffic snarled on icy roads, units lost hours, officers second-guessed their maps, and the paranoia spread faster than the commandos themselves. Suddenly, no one could be trusted. Checkpoint guards began asking strange questions. What's the capital of Illinois? Who won the World Series? Questions no German would know. But the tension grew so sharp, even real Americans stumbled. A soldier from New Jersey hesitated too long. He was detained. An officer from Boston gave the wrong baseball team. He was nearly shot as a spy. The paranoia climbed all the way to the top. General Omar Bradley, commander of the U.S. 12th Army Group, was stopped by his own men. They demanded his papers. The highest-ranking American officer in Europe, treated like a suspect. For Skorzeny's men, success was short-lived. Captured commandos were quickly executed as spies. Their sabotage had little lasting effect on the battle, but the fear they created lingered. The thought that anyone, anywhere, could be the enemy haunted the Ardennes. In a war of tanks and artillery, a handful of disguised men had sown chaos across an entire front. New Year's Day, 1945. The Western Front lay frozen under winter skies. At dawn, Hitler's Luftwaffe played its last desperate card, codename Operation Bodenplatte. Hundreds of German fighters roared into the air. Messerschmitts, Focke-Wulfs, veteran pilots on one final mission. Their target, Allied airfields in Belgium and the Netherlands. Catch the enemy off guard, wipe out their air power on the ground. At first, it worked. Rows of arced planes erupted in flames, runways choked with burning wreckage. In a few furious hours, more than 300 Allied aircraft were destroyed. But victory came at a price Germany could not afford. The Luftwaffe lost hundreds of planes. Worse, irreplaceable pilots, men trained for years gone in a single morning. Allied losses could be replaced in weeks. Germany's losses? Never. Bodenplatte was meant to turn the tide. Instead, it broke the last strength of Hitler's air force. From that day on, the skies belonged to the Allies. And without the skies, Germany's armies on the ground were doomed. For days, the Ardennes had been shrouded. Snow, fog, low clouds. The German advance thrived under the cover of winter. But then the skies cleared. And with clear skies came the hammer. Allied fighter bombers took to the air. Thunderbolts, Mustangs, Typhoons. They swarmed over the frozen roads. Columns of German armor were caught in the open. Tanks blasted into fireballs. Convoys shredded by rockets and bombs. Fuel trucks turned into rolling infernos. There was nowhere to hide. Every road became a graveyard of steel. Every village a target. From the north, American forces pressed down. From the south, Patton's Third Army surged upward. The Bulge, that Hitler had driven into Allied lines, was being crushed. What began as a daring gamble was now turning into a slow, merciless collapse. The sky, once Germany's shield, had become the Allies' most devastating weapon. By February, Hitler's great gamble lay in ruins. The Ardennes, once the stage of surprise and chaos, was now littered with burned-out tanks and frozen corpses. German forces were retreating, back to the very positions where they had begun. Their losses were staggering. More than 120,000 men, killed, wounded, or captured, hundreds of tanks. Precious fuel and vehicles gone forever. The Reich had gambled its last reserves and lost them in the snow. For the Allies, the Bulge had been a trial of endurance. For Germany, it was a fatal wound. What Hitler had promised as a turning point became proof that the Third Reich was bleeding out. The Ardennes winter had ended not with triumph, but with collapse. Is Paris burning? Hitler demanded. It was not. August 1944. German forces surrendered the city to the Free French and the Allies. Crowds poured into the streets, flags waved, tears, songs, and gunfire filled the air, not of battle, but of celebration. Charles de Gaulle marched through the boulevards in triumph. To many, it felt like the soul of France itself had been restored. But for the Allies, Paris was only a chapter. The war was far from over. Beyond the joy, the path east lay heavy with obstacles. Supply lines strained. The German army was battered, but not yet broken. The liberation of Paris was a victory of the spirit. The final victory still waited across the Rhine. The Allies had victory, but not the gasoline to chase it. As German forces retreated, they left destruction behind. French ports were wrecked, docks smashed, warehouses burned. That meant every gallon of fuel, every shell, every ration of bread had to come ashore on the beaches of Normandy. From there, it traveled hundreds of miles over narrow, battered roads. The lifeline was the Red Ball Express, thousands of trucks marked with a red circle. They rolled day and night, through mud, rain, and enemy ambush. But no matter how fast they drove, it was never enough. A single U.S. armored division could drink 25,000 gallons of fuel in one day. The tanks were ready, the men were ready, but the gasoline wasn't. The advance east slowed, momentum stalled, and every day of delay gave Hitler time to plan his next move. A prize port was captured, but locked away. In September 1944, British forces seized Antwerp intact. Its vast docks could have fed entire armies. It was the key to unlocking the Allied advance. But there was a problem. Antwerp was 40 miles from the sea, and between the port and the open water lay the Scheldt estuary. The Germans had not abandoned it. They dug in along the riverbanks, fortified islands with heavy guns, and mined the waters. So even though Antwerp's docks stood waiting, no ships could reach them. Supplies piled up. Armies starved for fuel. The advance slowed to a crawl. The Allies had taken the prize, but until the river was cleared, it was as good as useless. To open Antwerp, first, they had to fight the swamps. The Germans still held the Scheldt estuary, a maze of flooded lowlands, dikes, and canals. Every village, every bridge, every patch of dry ground was a fortress. The task fell to the Canadians. They slogged through waist-deep water. Mud clung to their boots. Enemy fire cut across the marshes. It was war fought at walking speed. And then there was Walcheren Island, ringed with concrete bunkers, bristling with heavy guns. Its artillery commanded the river mouth, making Antwerp unreachable. On November 1, 1944, British commandos stormed its beaches, supported by massive naval guns. They clawed their way inland, house by house, dike by dike. The Germans resisted fiercely, but slowly, surely, the defenses crumbled. After weeks of brutal fighting, the estuary was cleared. Mines swept from the channel. For the first time, ships could sail into Antwerp. Supplies at last flowed freely. The Allied armies, stalled for months, could breathe again. It was a victory measured not in miles, but in blood and mud. Montgomery's bold gamble promised victory, until it failed. September 1944. Paratroopers dropped into Holland. Their mission: seize the bridges, hold them until Allied armor could arrive. At first, it worked. The 101st took Eindhoven. The 82nd held Nijmegen. A narrow road opened into Germany's back door. But at Arnhem, the plan shattered. 2 German panzer divisions waited. The British 1st Airborne fought with desperate courage for days. They clung to the bridge, outnumbered, outgunned, cut off. Relief never came. The tanks bogged down on single roads. Ambushes and blown bridges slowed the advance to a crawl. At Arnhem, The last defenders were crushed. The bridge was lost. Market Garden had been daring, but Arnhem became a bridge too far. The dream of ending the war by Christmas died in the Dutch lowlands, and with it, Allied momentum slowed to a bloody crawl. The sound came first, a low, buzzing drone across the sky. Londoners called it the doodlebug. Then silence, and everyone knew what came next. A fireball, a blast wave, another street torn apart. In June 1944, Hitler's vengeance weapons arrived. The V-1 flying bomb, simple, fast, deadly, launched from the coast of occupied Europe. Hundreds filled the skies each day. Anti-aircraft guns roared. Spitfires and the new Gloucester meteor jets chased them down. Many were shot from the sky, but not enough. Every one that slipped through meant more homes destroyed, more lives lost. Civilians lived under constant dread. Each buzz overhead brought the same question: would this one fall short, or end the street you lived on? The doodlebug had no pilot, no mercy, just fuel, wings, and a warhead. It was the sound of fear, echoing across Britain's skies. The supersonic shadow, no warning, no defense, just impact. That was the terror of Hitler's new weapon, the V-2 rocket. Unlike the buzzing V-1 South, these gave nothing away. No sound in the sky, no time to run. 1 second. A city was calm. The next explosion, rebel, chaos, launched from mobile sites hidden in forests and fields. The V-2 South rose into the stratosphere. They fell at 3,000 miles an hour, faster than sound. By the time you heard them, they had already struck London, Antwerp. Thousands of rockets rained down. Each carried a 1-ton warhead. Each cratered streets, smashed houses, and shattered morale. And for months there was no answer. No gun could reach them. No plane could catch them. Britain endured in silence, praying only that the launch sites would be destroyed. At last, as Allied armies pushed deeper into Europe, the rocket nests were overrun. The attacks ended, but the memory remained a shadow from the sky. The first glimpse of warfare's future. The city rose. The Soviets watched. The Nazis crushed. In the summer of 1944, Warsaw erupted. The Polish Home Army struck against its German occupiers. With rifles, grenades, and courage alone, they seized control of much of the city. For weeks, they held on, fighting house to house, street to street. Civilians joined them. Men, women, even children, all fighting for freedom. But they were waiting for help. Across the river, the Red Army stood. The Soviets had urged the Poles to rise, yet when the battle came, they did nothing. Stalin called the Polish fighters criminals. He let the Germans do his work for him. The Nazis answered with brutality. Tanks rolled down shattered boulevards. Airstrikes leveled block after block. Executions filled courtyards. Prisoners burned alive. Women and children gunned down as shields. By October, the uprising was crushed. The city was reduced to rubble. 200,000 people were dead. The survivors marched off to camps. Warsaw was left a ghost, its ruins a warning. Its silence an open wound. The Soviets finally entered months later. But by then, nothing remained to save. Stalin had achieved what he wanted, a destroyed resistance, and a Poland easier to control. Over whiskey in Moscow, Europe was divided by scribbles. It was October 1944. Winston Churchill sat across from Joseph Stalin. The war still raged, but they were already carving up the peace. Churchill pulled out a piece of paper. On it, he drew percentages. Romania, Soviet Union, 90%. Greece, Britain, 90%. Bulgaria, Hungary, Yugoslavia split between them. And Poland, left vague. Deliberately so. Stalin nodded. He ticked the paper with his blue pencil. A simple mark that decided the fate of millions. Churchill later called it the naughty document. A scrap of paper, casually pushed aside. But behind it lay the cold reality. Europe was being divided into spheres of influence. East and West. Soviet and Allied. A line that would harden into the Iron Curtain. To the soldiers still dying on the front lines, this secret bargain was unknown. To civilians under occupation, it was unthinkable. But for the leaders in Moscow, it was politics. It was the world after Hitler. And in that world, small nations were nothing more than percentages on a page. Germany left, but peace did not follow. Greece plunged into chaos. Monarchists and communists, once united against the Nazis, now turned their weapons on each other. Athens became a battlefield. Gunfire cracked through ancient streets. Neighbors fought neighbors. The dream of liberation dissolved into civil war. Britain, bound by Churchill's promise of 90% influence, intervened. British troops marched into the capital, not to fight Germans, but to hold back communists. For Stalin, the choice was simple. He stayed back. He honored the deal scribbled on that piece of paper in Moscow. Greece belonged to the West, and so the Soviet Union looked away. The price was paid in Greek blood. Thousands died in bitter street fighting. For many, the liberation of 1944 was just the beginning of another war. The Cold War was already casting its shadow, and Greece was one of its first battlegrounds. When the Red Army advanced, they found more than retreating German soldiers. They found death on a scale the world had never imagined. At Majdanek, outside Lublin, rows of barracks, barbed wire, and a silence that hid only horror. Inside, they discovered gas chambers, crematoria filled with ash, mountains of shoes, clothes, and hair, belongings of the vanished. It was not a prison, it was a factory of murder. Soon after, they reached Auschwitz. Here, the evidence was undeniable. Chambers disguised as showers, railway tracks ending in death, piles of children's toys beside piles of corpses. Millions had been murdered with industrial efficiency. The machinery of genocide exposed in steel and smoke. For many soldiers, hardened by years of war, this was the moment that broke them. The sheer scale of cruelty redefined the conflict itself. The war was no longer only about land, about armies, or about nations. It was about survival of humanity itself. And in those frozen barracks, the Allies understood the true cost of Hitler's war.